Anyone fascinated by the natural world has probably wondered why some animals have such strange-looking sense organs. The elephant with its huge ears, the antennae of a butterfly, which up close look like feathers, the snake with its split tongue. And what about less obvious enhancements, like the sensory cells on a crocodile's skin? Surely these evolutionary traits aren't just for decoration. In fact, the size, shape, and location of these animal sense organs is all for a purpose. And just like us, animals rely on their senses to communicate with each other, find their way around, stay safe, and most importantly, to find food. When you see how superior some animal senses are compared to those of humans, you might wonder how we ever managed to stay on top of the food chain. Animal super senses. You won't believe what's possible. In this episode, we'll explore the animal sense of sight, and you'll see there's a lot more to this than meets the naked eye. The human imagination is limited when it comes to animal senses. People with good vision are sometimes called eagle-eyed, but eagles can see a fish from many dozen meters away. Scientists believe that the first sets of eyes evolved around 540 million years ago, after an extinction event. Their original purpose was as straightforward light-detecting organs. With evolution, eyesight has come a long way. Today, vision is a critically important sense. Only you won't believe how some animals see the world. We often talk about a bird's eye view without stopping to consider what that means. But the eyesight of birds, such as eagles, falcons, and owls, is several times sharper than ours. Eagles can spot rabbits from miles away, while hawks and buzzards scan the earth from heights of 10 to 15,000 feet looking for tasty rodents. And once spotted, these birds can dive at speeds of over 100 miles per hour and still keep their target in focus. To match that kind of speed and agility, humans have to build jet fighter planes. The eagle eye is among one of the most fascinating in the animal kingdom. As an eagle descends from the sky to attack its prey, muscles in their eyes continually adjust the curvature of their cornea and lens to maintain an accurate focus on their target during approach and attack. The Nanking kestrel is common in open country in Australia. It hunts during the day for insects, mice, and small birds. Like all falcons, the kestrel has relatively large eyes. Not only do they have an elongated strip of dense light receptors, they also have two circular fovea as well. The circular ones are in a pit, and this acts like a telephoto lens, magnifying the image. The Nanking kestrel will hover above its prey from a height of 50 feet, detecting food that may be only a few centimeters in length. It's certainly an impressive feat. This incredible eyesight makes them extremely effective hunters. But kestrels have another weapon in their sensory arsenal. They can see ultraviolet light. By following the ultraviolet light naturally reflected off the scent and urine trails left behind by rodents, they can track down their prey. Now, you might take one look at an owl and think it doesn't look particularly dangerous. Just be glad you're not a worm. Owls' eyes are large, often weighing the same as humans. We also know they have forward-facing eyes, which give owls stereoscopic vision, very useful in judging distances. Oddly enough, the best way for small creatures to stay safe from an owl may actually be to move towards it and not away. As it happens, owls are long-sighted. The breed of owl who has the keenest daytime eyesight is called the eagle owl, a tribute to just how sharp-sighted eagles are. The eagle's vision is much sharper than ours, operating a bit like a telephoto camera lens. Just imagine being able to see an ant on the pavement from atop a 10-story building. That's the eagle way. One animal that birds of a different feather must always be on the lookout for is, of course, the cat. That'd be cats of all shapes and sizes, actually, because from the mightiest lion to the most placid domestic cat, most felines have superb night vision. But of course, it's the big cats, such as tigers and lions, which have the most powerful night eyes, something which enables them to hunt under the cover of darkness. Cats also have a reflective layer behind their eyes, known as a tapetum. It enhances their eyesight in reduced light circumstances. One visible effect of this are the bright, shining eyes that stare back at you when you point a flashlight at a cat. Not all cats are nocturnal, though. Cheetahs are fast daytime killers. They don't need the trickery necessary for nocturnal sight. The cheetah thrives in areas of open terrain and savanna. When prey is spotted, they use their phenomenal speed to give chase. Their exceptional eyesight, along with their speed, allows them to be such effective predators. But what makes the cheetah's eyes so super powerful? Mammals have a layer at the back of the eye where sensory cells respond to incoming light. On this layer, there is an area that is denser in sensory cells, called the fovea. And here, the cheetah is formidable too. The elongated shape of the cheetah's retinal fovea gives it ultra-sharp wide-angle vision, enabling them not only to chase their prey, but also make sudden turns with near-perfect accuracy. It is thought that the dark tear marks beneath their eyes may also enhance their vision by cutting down on the sun's glare. Cheetahs just don't go running around at top speed on a whim. They deploy their keen eyesight to scan the environment for signs of prey. With its distinctive spotted coat providing camouflage in the high and dry grass, its speed and agility, plus those unforgiving eyes, the cheetah is one dangerous customer. Now, of course, there's one big cat that seems to rule over all of them, at least as humans perceive things. But you don't become known as the king of the animals unless you have finely tuned senses, and that's where the lion lords over most other predators. Their eyesight is a significant factor, especially when the sun goes down over the savanna. While in daylight hours, a lion's sight is said to be about level with ours. At nighttime, they shift gear. You see, lions are believed to have 8 times better night vision than we do. Lions apparently see things in blues and greens. And while they will be lost in a completely pitch-black room, for example, there's a lot of moonlight and starlight on the African plains. And it is this which guides them, usually, to their next midnight snack. But let's not forget their not-so-distant cousin, the cat. This includes feral felines, such as this particular Australian wildcat, but also ordinary household domestic cats. Cats are by far the most active at dawn and dusk. The term for this is crepuscular, in case you ever wondered if there was a word to describe their frantic activity at sunrise and sunset. Night vision comes in useful at these hours, and cats' eyes have 6 to 8 times more rod cells, sensitive to low light, than humans do. Cats have greater range of peripheral vision too, so in the corner of their eye they can spot that trembling mouse hiding in the corner. The elliptical shape of cats' eyes, larger corneas, and the bright tapestry make them natural-born night stalkers. This cat certainly doesn't look as if he's going to let his prey get away, and its patience and persistence can be weapons too. And now, we examine an animal which seems to break all the rules. It can change skin color and look in 2 directions at the same time. There are around 160 species of chameleons dispersed across the globe in rainforests and deserts, from the Middle East to Sri Lanka, though half of those species live on the island of Madagascar. These lizard kings vary greatly in size, from a length of just 15 millimeters to 68 centimeters, and have coiled tongues that are sometimes twice the length of their body and can feed on insects by using their tongues like ballistic missiles. To accurately use such a weapon, chameleons need superior sight. Eyes are mounted on conical turrets that can move independently of each other, and upper and lower eyelids are joined, with only a pinhole large enough for the pupil to see through. The structure of their eyes gives the chameleon 360-degree vision. Working like a tiny telephoto camera lens, their eyes focus super fast, zooming in on targets at phenomenal speeds. When prey is spotted, both eyes can be focused in the same direction, and the result is a combination of sharp stereoscopic vision and incredible depth perception. As if that wasn't enough, chameleons can see both visible and ultraviolet light. Chameleons exposed to UV light apparently become more social animals and even show more interest in reproduction. Your humble, everyday bumblebee comes with ultraviolet vision. In all but a very few rare cases, UV light, or ultraviolet radiation, is invisible to the human eye. These waves come at different frequencies or wavelengths. They lie on a spectrum from longest wavelengths to the shortest at the other end. Our brains interpret the different wavelengths as colors. But humans can only see a very small part of this spectrum. Most of the light in the universe is invisible to us, but not to honeybees. Bees, like many other insect species, see from approximately 300 to 650 nanometers. In simple terms, this means they cannot see the color red, but at the lower end of the scale, they can see the ultraviolet spectrum, which humans cannot. It is no coincidence that many flowers have ultraviolet color patterns. These are patterns invisible to the human eye, but which catch the eyes of the bee. Bees depend on nectar and pollen, which means they have no choice but to find flowers. Some of the ultraviolet patterns actually look a bit like helicopter landing pads. It's as if they're being directed to landing zones where they'll find the part of the plant with the most nectar and pollen. True, bees have an acute sense of smell, but the bee's super sight is what detects flowers at a distance. Every time a bee drops in, some of the pollen gets stuck to the little creature, which means it'll probably deposit it later in another flower. And so, the circle of life continues. Bee eyesight has evolved to be in tune with flowers, but also, plants in flower have evolved in order to attract bees which they need, in order to transmit pollen from one plant to another. Put succinctly, that's how they reproduce. So if anyone still talks about the birds and the bees these days, that's how it all got started. Polarization is another amazing visual super sense, one that belongs to one of the most fantastic creatures to grip the human imagination. But now, we turn to the place even darker and more mysterious, and that's the ocean and the ocean floor. For octopi, the super sense of polarized sight is critical, aiding and abetting their search for prey, but also enabling them to communicate with their fellow creatures. The chromatophores and iridescent cells on the skin of an octopus create visual patterns that transmit signals from one octopus to all the other octopi that happen to be in range. These chromatophore patterns change depending on variables such as whether it's mating season, or for example, if the octopus is alarmed. These changes in pattern are how octopi communicate with one another. But polarized vision also allows them and other cephalopods to zone in on otherwise transparent prey, like jellyfish. The octopus is, of course, an invertebrate. It literally has no spine. It is also a cephalopod, an exclusively marine creature. Cephalopods are characterized by their bilateral body symmetry, which in everyday terms means they look roughly the same on one side as they do on the other. They have a prominent head and several large tentacles attached to their body. 8, of course, in the case of the octopus. Squid and cuttlefish are also cephalopods. Like the octopus, they too can distinguish the polarization of light. The octopus is considered one of the most intelligent of invertebrates. The octopus's eye develops an invagination, or in-pocketing of the skin. Be that as it may, each octopus eye has a retina, a cornea, an iris, a lens, and a fluid-filled interior, and is quite a piece of evolutionary engineering. And now, on Super Senses, a fish like no other. The archerfish, which is usually found in fresh water, is quite unlike any other fish because the archerfish finds its prey living outside of the water. Insects, butterflies, spiders, and other small creatures are the archerfish's habitual prey, and it typically searches for victims resting on branches or twigs just above the water's surface. The clever archerfish then positions itself underneath its prey, and with the pinpoint accuracy of a sharpshooter, knocks it off the branch and its perch, with the blast from a powerful jet of water shot from its mouth. Archerfish are remarkably accurate, usually hitting their intended target on the very first shot. The hapless creature then falls into the dip, and the triumphant archerfish swims to the surface long enough to retrieve its meal, with the satisfaction of a job well done. Their eyes are able to correct for the way light distorts and bends as it enters the water. It's the unique structure of their eyes that gives them a remarkably accurate aim. Recent research has found that the archerfish has parts of its retina tuned to whether it's looking at the aquatic or aerial field of view. The bottom part of the retina looks up, which means the archerfish is looking out of the water, and the top of the retina looks down as the archerfish looks below the water surface. One of the most peculiar-looking animals of land, sky, or sea, the mantis shrimp has possibly the most complex visual system on this entire incredible planet. As it scuttles along, looking like a particularly large and crustaceous caterpillar, the mantis shrimp's eyes don't miss a trick. They have compound eyes, for one thing. A compound eye consists of hundreds or even thousands of individual photoreceptor units. The image perceived by the owners of compound eyes is a combination of the input from these eye units. Just to make things more interesting, the mantis shrimp's compound eyes are mounted on mobile stalks, which move independent of each other. It can detect ultraviolet and infrared, and all of this is achieved, the experts reckon, without any intervention from its minuscule brain. Well, that's just about it for this episode of Animal Super Senses. The way animals see the world has offered us fascinating insight to the richness and complexity of life. We've seen things from a bird's eye view and used our ultraviolet vision underwater. We've had the night vision on while we roamed the African plains and met the chameleon who can see every which way at the same time. And we'll see too in our next episode how animal super senses can take you to some interesting places. Anyone fascinated by the natural world has probably wondered why some animals have such strange-looking sense organs. The elephant with its huge ears, the antennae of a butterfly, which up close look like feathers, the snake with its split tongue. And what about less obvious enhancements, like the sensory cells on a crocodile's skin? Surely these evolutionary traits aren't just for decoration. In fact, the size, shape, and location of these animal sense organs is all for a purpose. And just like us, animals rely on their senses to communicate with each other, find their way around, stay safe, and most importantly, to find food. When you see how superior some animal senses are compared to those of humans, you might wonder how we ever managed to stay on top of the food chain. Animal super senses. You won't believe what's possible. Welcome to Animal Super Senses, the show that enables you to see it, hear it, taste it, smell it, and feel it like animals do. Animals use sight, smell, taste, touch, hearing, and other special senses to negotiate their way through a sometimes cruel and unforgiving world. On this episode, we travel from the desert to the forest, Australia to Borneo and back to learn how species as diverse as bat-eared foxes, the bilby, deer, kangaroo rats, cicadas, proboscis monkeys, and other creatures never miss an auditory trick. In these huge expanses of shrubland, grazed and fought over by some of the most recognizable wildlife on the planet, we find this particularly curious critter. The bat-eared fox makes its home in areas with short grass and low scrub, feeding on mostly insects and invertebrates. To get a hold of creatures that small, it helps to be able to hear them. So the large ears of the bat-eared fox aren't just for decoration. They're filled with blood vessels which help cool the animal down during the day. Just as well, because it gets hot out here on the savanna. But their ears are also an effective sound gatherer, funneling sound to the inner ear. What's more, these swiveling ears can turn 180 degrees to help locate their tiny prey, as well as the animals that prey on them. Bat-eared foxes have to be especially alert to the sounds of the slender mongoose, brown hyena, and black-backed jackals, all of which can kill and eat bat-eared foxes at regular intervals. Good hearing in general is a huge advantage for animals who would rather avoid being eaten. The desert offers lean pickings for omnivores, with sparse vegetation, meaning fewer places to hide. The bilby seems to spend most of its time avoiding being eaten. A marsupial, in fact the largest known member of the bandicoot family, the bilby is truly a nocturnal animal. They usually don't come out of the ground until long after dusk and head back an hour or two before sunrise. If it's a full moon, or there's heavy wind or rain, bilbies will stay cooped up in their burrows all night. When they do get out amongst it, they rely on their hearing to survive. Notice their large, mostly hairless ears, which allows sound to pass unheeded to the inner ear, and also helps to amplify sound. In fact, it's not unlike the effect of cupping your hands behind your ears. But of course, there's a lot more to animal supersense of hearing than having outsized ears. Take banner-tailed rats, for example. Their hearing is so keen that they can hear wind ruffling the feathers of an owl flying through the forest at night. Yet unlike the bat-eared foxes we saw earlier, the ears of the banner-tailed rat aren't particularly large in proportion to the rest of their body. It's the large feet and hind legs that stand out on this animal. No, with the banner-tailed rat, all the precise audio engineering work goes on inside the creature's ears. Banner-tailed rats have a huge eardrum beating away inside that medium-sized ear, and a larger than usual middle ear chamber to boot. Large bony structures surrounding the banner-tailed rat's inner ear enhance their extremely sensitive hearing. Size is no guarantee when it comes to animal sensory strength. Some of the smallest animals have the largest powers of hearing and auditory communication. Though their habitat is different, deer are another animal who rely on their sense of hearing to stay out of the way of trouble. You'll note that they too have large pinnae ears which move independently. This directional hearing means they can zone in on where a sound is coming, and it is believed from how far away, meaning how fast they had better run to get away from it. This, in large measure, is why it is so hard to sneak up on a deer in the woods. And as all those deer hunters out there could possibly attest, deers instinctively distinguish between the sounds it hears every day in the forest and unfamiliar noises, such as the opening of a car door or human footsteps. In some respects, hearing is the most important of deer senses. For though their sense of smell is acute, an ill wind can always blow outdoors in an unhelpful direction, whereas they can rely better on their ears to guide them. Deers also hear things at a higher frequency than humans, though we can pick up on things lower in the spectrum than they can. Rodents, such as the lowly rat and humble mouse, come with the gift of ultrasonic hearing as standard equipment. That means they can hear in a frequency above the human ear's audibility limit. The hearing range most often means the range of sound waves and vibrations which can be heard by humans and other animals. The easiest way might be to imagine a piano keyboard. Humans typically hear notes in the middle of the keyboard. Others very high or very low are inaudible to us. At the lower end of the scale, rats and mice and other rodents don't just make the squeaky noises we humans are able to pick up on. Oh no, they are able to communicate in a whole rich world of sound and auditory cues, but outside of our range of hearing. Imagine what it might be like if we could hear it. Larger animals that are able to hear things in the infrasonic range tend to have large heads, as in larger than human, and have fair-sized ears set wide apart. There's perhaps no better example than the elephant. Of course, elephant ears are notable for a variety of reasons. For one thing, they can move their ears back and forth, which helps cool them down. They contain a network of blood vessels, which help to regulate the elephant's temperature, circulating blood through its ears. Elephants can hear things at 20 frequencies lower on the hearing range than we can, in the range known as infrasound. That low rumbling sound you sometimes hear elephants make, that's the thin edge of the wedge. Other elephants can pick up on such rumblings, and others we cannot detect as far as 6 kilometers away. These long-distance conversations are useful in letting male elephants know when females are around and if they're in heat. Mating season, and this rumble in the jungle is no joke for elephants. It's only for a few days out of every 2 to 4 years that females are ready to mate. And that's when they send out this mating call. It's the call that no bull elephant wants to miss. As well as those gigantic flapping ears, elephants can detect sounds through their trunks and their feet. Both come with receptors that pick up on those low-frequency vibrations in the infrasound spectrum. When you see an elephant with their trunk on the ground and their feet carefully positioned, it means they're having a good old listen. They could be tuning into the subsonic rumblings made by other elephants, or listening out for thunderstorms and the approach of rain. In the dry season on the African plain, this is a huge advantage, as they can move towards the rain and towards water, which is vital for survival. The large ears of bat-eared foxes and elephants give them their ability to amplify sound. But there's one rather singular animal who uses another part of its body to amplify sound. Because it's important to hear what's going on, communicating your message can be a matter of life and death. To make our case in point, we travel to the world's third largest island, one whose very name has become a synonym for the wild side of nature, Borneo, home of the proboscis monkey. This primate, found exclusively in the wilds of Borneo, has many unusual characteristics. One of the largest and most distinctive of all primates, they have partially webbed feet and make fine swimmers. And it's the male of the species who develops the largest nose. But its protruding nose is also an aid in spreading the alarm when danger is near. When feeling threatened, the male proboscis monkey's nose swells up, and this swelling means his nose acts as a sound chamber. The monkey's call of anguish or alarm echoes off those chamber walls. Its cries travel further, hopefully reaching females and warning them of impending danger. Most often crocodiles or clouded leopards, or sometimes, sad to say, humans. The proboscis monkey is on the endangered species list. From a nose that works as an amplifier to an up-close examination of creatures in the insect world, whose sense of hearing originates in some odd places. Cicadas and grasshoppers carry their ears on their abdomens. While crickets and katydids hear through holes in their hind legs. Their reason for being there? Well, sound detection generally works better when the detectors, the ears, are set far apart. Crickets and katydids certainly need their sensitive auditory system. As most of us know from experience, the leaf-like insect has a proclivity for making a lot of noise, especially on warm summer nights. It's critical for survival to discriminate between the sounds of a receptive mate singing right back and the sound of a bat whose calls may be in the same frequency. Striking a bum note in this case could be a matter of life and death. Especially when you consider the animal which crickets and cicadas have most reason to fear, the bat, and its super sense of echolocation. Bats, of the kind the cricket and cicada need to listen out for, rely on echolocation, which in simple terms is like seeing through sound. It's an interesting fact that bat species use echolocation all the time. Bats are generally nocturnal and catch their prey while in mid-flight. Echolocation enables them to decode thousands of sound signals, These sound signals bounce back from a tree's leaves, branches, and trunk to build a sound picture of their surroundings. Echolocation helps bats to find their preferred food types, insects such as crickets and cicadas. But the really neat thing about echolocation is that it also enables bats not just to hear a sound, but to really make a noise. Bats generate ultrasound waves through their larynx and emit sounds through their open mouth or nose. Fascinating and recent research has shown that quite conclusively, bat males sing in ultrasound to attract females. What the research seems to prove is that female bats are more attracted to those male bats whose mating calls are more elaborate. Even stranger and more revealing is the fact that both male and female bats sing in secret, at a frequency perhaps few, if any, creatures in their environment can hear. It's almost as Bram Stoker put in Dracula, "The children of the night, what sweet music they make." The forest at night. Aside from the sound of a bird tweeting, wind blowing, or the crackling of twigs, seems to us a pretty quiet place. But with the right kind of ears, it is a cacophony of sounds. Somewhere in the midst of that primeval dark, an owl flies, almost noiselessly, through the night air. Silent but violent, the barn owl as depicted here is reckoned by some as the most widespread bird species on Earth. Sharp eyesight and the fact that they fly almost silently through the air have a lot to do with their prolific success as predators. But maybe the real stealth weapon in the owl's arsenal is their super sense of subsonic hearing. You won't hear an owl coming unless they issue their signature call, but they will most certainly hear you. Owl ears are also asymmetrical, which is to say the left ear is not level with the right. As with all smart evolutionary design, there's a good reason for this. Asymmetrical ears give them the direction of sound, the difference in time it takes for a sound to reach the right or left ear. Put it this way, owls can hear a rodent moving under several feet of snow from 50 feet away. When you think of it that way, the poor little critters just don't stand a chance. On Animal Super Senses, we see it, hear it, taste it, smell it, and feel it like animals do. The senses are the star of this show, and this episode has been no exception. The sense of hearing has taken us on a memorable journey. But these incredible powers of perception will fight again another day. So join us next time on Animal Super Senses. Anyone fascinated by the natural world has probably wondered why some animals have such strange-looking sense organs. The elephant with its huge ears, the antennae of a butterfly, which up close look like feathers, the snake with its split tongue. And what about less obvious enhancements, like the sensory cells on a crocodile's skin? Surely these evolutionary traits aren't just for decoration. In fact, the size, shape, and location of these animal sense organs is all for a purpose. And just like us, animals rely on their senses to communicate with each other, find their way around, stay safe, and most importantly, to find food. When you see how superior some animal senses are compared to those of humans, you might wonder how we ever managed to stay on top of the food chain. Animal super senses. You won't believe what's possible. On this episode of Animal Super Senses, we get in touch with the feelings of wild animals. Really in touch. Because animals, just like humans, rely heavily on their sense of touch every day in every way. There may be a fine line between pleasure and pain, but not knowing the difference between the two can be absolutely fatal. The sense of touch does more than tell us about that ant biting into our skin, or helps a grizzly bear to keep hold of a slippery salmon when he is hungry. Touch alerts animals to pressure, heat, cold, wind, and yes, pain. Helping them to catch food, manipulate objects in their paws, but also to navigate and communicate. Touch receptors, which include body hair, inform the brain about tactile sensations. These receptors fall into two main categories: mechanoreceptors, which detect movement, and thermoreceptors, which respond to temperature. On the vast plains of the African savanna, there is an animal not famed for its sensitivity, when perhaps it should be. After all, we are talking about the largest living land mammal, one that eats a minimum of 200 pounds per day and whose skin is their own body armor. But don't be fooled by their size, their seemingly thick skin, or prodigious appetites. African elephants and their Indian relatives are remarkably sensitive creatures. For one thing, they are highly intelligent animals, which display complex social behaviors, such as courtship, communal care, vocal communication, and play. But they are also sensitive in the most literal and most scientific use of the word. To begin with, that thick skin up to 1.5 inches thick is in fact highly tuned to the slightest touch. And no part of the elephant's body is more tactile than its trunk. Used primarily to locate and manipulate food, elephants are herbivores, and an elephant's trunk is in constant use. They are remarkable for their strength as well as sensitivity, able to pick up objects in excess of 500 pounds in weight. But their trunks are also so responsive to touch that they are capable of perceiving pressure differences as low as 0.01 inch in depth. The small sensory hairs on the tip of the trunk are in part responsible for this sensitivity. Called Pacinian corpuscles, these cells pick up on the tiniest vibrations. It's interesting to note that Pacinian corpuscles show up elsewhere in nature, on human fingertips, for example. On the elephant's trunk, they are constantly in use, as the trunk plays a part not just in foraging for food, but in that rich social life. The trunk can be used to caress, nudge, or nudge other members of the herd, not least during mating season. Well, as the old saying goes, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. Mutual grooming is an important and practical way for social animals not only to look after one another, but also to form bonds. There can be few bonds in the wild stronger than a mother kangaroo and her baby Joey. While still the tiniest infant, it climbs from its mother's abdomen to her pouch and stays there for over 6 months. Kangaroos then are used to intimacy from the get-go. Fun fact, a group of kangaroos is called a mob. To be accepted into the mob, an outsider will be subject to a sniffing, but also a rubbing of noses. Mutual grooming and touching may then proceed uninhibited. But rub a kangaroo the wrong way and it could come to blows. Ritualized fighting, or as it looks to us, boxing, is a part of this marsupial's tactile toolkit. It's that moment when a kanga's sense of touch becomes a sense of ouch. Tens of thousands of miles away from the Australian outback, on the Serengeti National Park, another very distinctive mammal uses touch to strengthen bonds between family and herd. Zebras live in herds as many as 1,000 strong, but their first loyalty is always to the family group, which will generally number between 5 and 20 animals. They will maintain these bonds over many years. The bonds are strong. For example,
If an individual gets lost or has to slow down due to age or injury, the rest of the zebras will go on the lookout for their lost companion or adjust their traveling pace in response. Something that strengthens those bonds are mutual groomings, where zebras line up alongside each other, neck and neck and cheek to cheek as it were, and nibble the hair on each other's neck and back. That actually looks like fun. The sensory hairs on the skins of mammals plays a big part in their sense of touch. But if we shrink things down, the very same thing applies to arachnids, spiders for example. This small but serious-looking customer is a trapdoor spider. It's able to detect vibrations and movement through the tiny sensory hairs on its body. Trapdoor spiders, just as their name suggests, are ambush predators, meaning they lie in wait. Just biding their time until their spidey sense feels a vibration, and then they pounce. And then it is all over. The orb weaver spider goes about snaring their prey in a slightly different manner, but they too rely on their sense of touch to get it right. With their notably poor eyesight, they must. The webs they so cleverly weave are not there only to ensnare their prey, although they do that very effectively too. The orb weaver spider's web also extends their range of feeling or sense of touch. But perhaps the strangest application of the super spidey sense of touch, sorry, how could we resist, isn't about luring and trapping prey so much as about practicing safe sex. As in the case with many arachnids, the funnel web spider male spider is considerably smaller than its female counterpart. When the male wants to mate with the female, he encounters a minefield of potentially hazardous obstacles to success. For one thing, the female, if caught by surprise, will often simply eat her hapless suitor. And so much for romance. If, however, the male approaches her less aggressively and in effect strokes her shell with his legs, giving her what we might think of in anthropomorphic terms as a back massage, then the female is less likely to kill and eat him on approach. And in fact, the male may be lucky and survive several bouts of spider intercourse before she finally decides not only is she through with him, but she's hungry. The sting is in the tail when it comes to scorpions. If you ever feel their touch, it may be the last thing you feel. The desert crawlers we see here are known as large, hairy desert scorpions. These scorpions still come with the same elongated body, the same segmented tail, and yes, the same venomous stinger at the end of that tail. They have, count them, 4 pairs of legs and a pair of appendages called pedipalps, which look a lot like claws. These work like pincers, excellent for grasping hold of prey and for defense. Not only are they standard equipment for insect aliens in every science fiction movie you've ever seen, they're also highly intricate pieces of equipment. Fine sensory hairs pick up on wind-borne vibrations. Tiny organs on the tips of their legs can detect vibrations in the ground. And on its soft underbelly, the scorpion rounds out their armory of touch sensors with these comb-like sense organs known as pectines. The teeth of this comb detect and evaluate the texture and vibrations of different surfaces. Hair sensors come in all sizes, from the microscopic to the outsized. Whiskers, such as the ones you see on this cheetah out on the prowl of the East African grasslands, are an example of hair sensors you can definitely see for yourself. Whiskers, more correctly known as vibrissa, supply their owners with vital sensory information about their environment. The follicle of each and every whisker is connected to thousands of nerve receptors, meaning the animal can feel its way through its surroundings by picking up on tiny vibrations in the air or water. No doubt this comes in handy for the cheetah, but this cat does its hunting during the day. Where whiskers really come into their own as an alternative sensing device is when day turns to night and nocturnal predators must move with stealth and accuracy. There's no better example of a feline with wicked whiskers than the leopard, perhaps the most elegant night prowler of them all. A leopard will typically have as many as 30 whiskers on either side of its face, meaning some 30,000 nerve receptors. They're acutely sensitive, enough to sense vibrations in the changing air currents. And in comparison with their size, the leopard's whiskers are the widest of all the felines, wider in fact than their bodies. Sad to say, in Asia, leopard whiskers are prized for the wrong reasons. Used in dubious medicines, they are another reason that poachers hunt this magnificent creature. Half a world and oceans away from such trouble, the Australian sea lion is renowned for its whiskery good looks. In fact, there's even a university-sponsored website dedicated to studying the habits of Western Australian sea lions, called Whisker Patrol. But their facial hair isn't for decoration, nor does it have as much a part to play when the Aussie sea lion wanders onto dry land. No, their whiskers really come into their own when the Australian sea lion goes underwater, close to the sea floor. To hunt for squid, fish, octopus, rock lobsters, and even small sharks, the Aussie sea lion will typically seek out this kind of prey by closing their eyes and feeling around using their whiskers. The sea lion's whiskers are in fact a highly sensitive hydrodynamic receptor system. In slightly simpler terms, that means they can detect the tiny vibrations that are created when fish and other tasty morsels move through the water. One of the creatures the sea lion hunts for is, as mentioned, the octopus. But octopi are outfitted with their own super sense of touch, helping them to elude capture and to track down prey of their own. As it has been captured in popular imagination over the past few years, the octopus is a highly intelligent animal. It is the only invertebrate that is thought to use tools. For example, gathering shells and using them as body armor. Octopuses have even been known to break out of their aquariums and get into others in the hunt for a good meal. There are even cases where octopi have clambered aboard fishing boats and opened up the hold to get at the crabs within. But how do they do all that? Well, their unusually high intelligence doesn't hinder them, but they go a long way by utilizing their super sense of touch. The blue-ringed octopus, depicted here, is commonly found in tide pools and coral reefs of the Pacific and Indian Oceans. As with all of their kind, they have 2 eyes and 4 pairs of arms. Now, on each arm, there are 2 rows of off-white colored suckers that can be moved independently. There are thousands of these little suckers on an octopus's body, and every one of those suckers may contain up to 10,000 neurons that detect the slightest touch, as well as taste. What you most certainly don't want to do is to come into close contact with a blue-ringed octopus. The venom it unleashes when it seizes its prey is said to be over 1,000 times more lethal than cyanide. On animal supersenses, we touch it and feel it, see it and hear it, taste it and smell it like animals do. The senses are the star on this show, and this episode has been no exception. The sense of touch has put us in contact with all kinds of heightened sensations. But these incredible powers of perception will fight again another day. So join us next time on Animal Supersenses.
Anyone fascinated by the natural world has probably wondered why some animals have such strange-looking sense organs. The elephant with its huge ears, the antennae of a butterfly, which up close look like feathers. The snake with its split tongue. And what about less obvious enhancements, like the sensory cells on a crocodile's skin? Surely these evolutionary traits aren't just for decoration. In fact, the size, shape, and location of these animal sense organs is all for a purpose. And just like us, animals rely on their senses to communicate with each other, find their way around, stay safe, and most importantly, to find food. When you see how superior some animal senses are compared to those of humans, you might wonder how we ever managed to stay on top of the food chain. Animal super senses. You won't believe what's possible. On this episode of Animal Super Senses, we examine how things taste and how vital scent is from the animal perspective. You may think that there are no gourmets in the natural world. After all, animals eat for survival, not for enjoyment as we know it. So surely only humans are capable of differentiating one taste from another. Actually, it's much more complicated and interesting than that. In the animal world, the distinction between taste and scent tends to be more blurred. For example, for terrestrial animals, those that walk on land, taste is all about detecting chemicals called tastants that stimulate the sensory cells in a taste bud. But their sense of smell will also detect the scent of odorants carried through the air. In mammals, taste receptor cells are scattered all over the tongue. In other creatures, they can be located in some fairly odd places. How taste and smell receptors work underwater, well, it's a whole other world. Let's begin our journey, as it were, from the ground up, with a look at snakes and their taste for a good bite. This slithery character is a rattlesnake, such as can be found across the Americas, from southern Alberta to Argentina, in a variety of habitats. The one thing that all rattlesnakes have in common with other snake breeds is their uniquely good taste. They use those famous forked tongues to gather particles from the air and identify them on a special membrane called Jacobson's organ. Put more simply, they flick their tongues to taste the scents around them. So next time you see a snake sticking its tongue out at you, remember, it's not trying to sting you from afar, but searching for prey. Tasting their next meal before they eat it, you could even say. They have an exceptional sense of smell to begin with, but their Jacobson's organ adds a whole other dimension. The Jacobson's olfactory sense organ was actually discovered by Ludwig Jacobson, who it's named after. The organ that now bears Jacobson's name is located on the roof of the mouth in many reptiles and mammals. Mammals would include us, surely. Well, apparently, humans are an exception. Now, unlike snakes and lizards, mammals that come with Jacobson's organ as standard equipment
tend not to have long forked tongues that they can whip out at will to sample the air. So instead, they do something else. It's called flemening. Domestic cats do it, for instance. And so does this character, the tapir. Looking a bit like a pig with a trunk, tapirs actually belong to the same family as the horse and the rhinoceros. They can be found in the jungle and forest regions of Central and South America and in Southeast Asia. Tapirs' eyesight isn't great, but they have a heightened sense of smell, plus the secret sensor that is the Jacobson's organ. When they curl their upper lip and look like they're sneering, the same way you've seen some domestic cats do, they're actually exposing the Jacobson's organ so they can taste exactly what's in the air. The tapir is an herbivore. That long snout with a modified lip comes in handy for tearing food off branches, for example. What the leaves taste like to the tapir, perhaps we'll never know, but we do know how it finds its sustenance. Below the waterline, whether that's a pond, river, or the ocean waves, taste and scent is a whole other matter. One underwater animal who is guided by scent is this sinister and slippery-looking character, the moray eel. Even though there are hundreds of species of moray, and they range in size from 25 centimeters to 4 meters, the menacing appearance of a moray eel with its mouth constantly agape is unmistakable. Morays are carnivores who feed on fish and invertebrates. They're also found in oceans temperate and tropical, though they thrive in the greatest number around warm coral reefs, notably in Hawaii. They have something of a reputation for aggression and what might even be called a bad temper. But actually, when they sense humans approaching, they usually flee or hide in crevices. Mind you, it's usually from these same crevices, nooks, and crannies that morays launch their fatal attacks. When they do, they are led, as it were, by the nose. Moray eels' eyesight is poor, and they rely on their tube-shaped nostrils to scent and seek out prey. Fascinatingly, one of the moray eel's preferred victims, the octopus, has evolved a chemical in its jet black ink, which is capable of neutralizing the moray eel's powerful sense of smell. On its travels, the moray eel will quite possibly also come across the goatfish. These are also found in shallow waters, particularly in warm or tropical climes, skimming along coral reefs over mud or sand. They have twin barbels hanging underneath their chin, which must be where they got their name, as they look like goat's whiskers, or, if you're feeling particularly imaginative, like a droopy hipster's beard. Some goatfish are nocturnal and have a chameleon-like ability to change their color, but what they all seem to have in common is their hearty appetite. Goatfish spend their entire lives looking for food. How they find it is by utilizing those barbels. Goatfish are what is known as bottom feeders, skimming along looking for their next meal in the sand below. Those barbels are spotted with taste buds that will zone in on anything that's good enough to eat. For example, shrimp, crabs, clams, and clamworms. Goatfish are guided by their sense of taste and smell to their next meal, and the one after that, and the one after that. But there are some underwater animals who deploy this super sense not so much in the hunt for food, but as a sophisticated homing device. It's called natal homing by the experts. Now, homing is something we associate with animals above the waterline, most commonly cats and pigeons. But it is now known that several marine animals, such as elephant seals, salmon, and sea turtles, may travel considerable distances of ocean before they return as adults to reproduce in the same natal area they were spawned. Sea turtles outlived the dinosaurs, yet today, 5 of 7 species are on the endangered species list. They also take a long time to reach sexual maturity, a decade or more. So, observing them and drawing conclusions is a time-consuming and painstaking business. Sea turtles spend their whole lives at sea, except when adult females come ashore to lay eggs in the territory where they were born. The question is, how do they do it? It's thought that sea turtles find their birth beach by homing in on the chemical signature unique to where they were born, essentially tasting their way home. With these amazing abilities, that's what we call a real super sense. The case of the salmon's homing instinct is another baffler. Most salmon are born in fresh water. They migrate to the ocean, where they will spend 4 to 5 years eating and growing. At maturity, they return to breed and lay eggs in the freshwater streams they were born in. When they return to fresh water to breed, it was assumed that salmon use the scent of the water to find their home stream, and certainly the salmon's olfactory sense is astonishing. But now, scientists are starting to question if salmon also navigate using the Earth's magnetic field. Either way, those are some super senses the salmon deploys. Another way in which scent is critical for animals is when it comes to marking their territory. Leaving a scent stamp on their territory, most animals don't waste a lot of time being subtle. The lion urinates on a tree to mark the boundaries of his kingdom and advise any other lions who come along that this tree is taken. The hippopotamus, however, scatters its feces to let intruders know who's in charge around here. This is called dung showering by those who study hippos, and something else by anyone who happens to be around. So far, the animals we've discussed who mark their territory do so in fairly standard ways, even if, like the hippo, they tend towards the alarming. But nature's endless adaptations never fail to amaze. Take the Thompson's gazelle, which is typically found on the African savanna. The male Thompson has a particularly odd way of marking its territory. When it's mating season, they establish breeding grounds by leaving their scent in an unusual manner, secreting a smelly substance from a gland below its eye. The Thompson's gazelle sticks the stuff on grass stems to ward off male interlopers and attract females. A long way from the African plains, in the woodlands of Queensland in South Australia, you'll find one of those animals that we humans like to think of as cute. The koala, of course, is not to be confused with bears of any kind, for of course, this is a marsupial, whose closest relative is the wombat. This photogenic Aussie sleeps up to 20 hours a day and has one of the lowest brain-to-body ratios of any marsupial. If you come across one in the wild, urinating on a tree, you would see it marking its territory, particularly if it was a male, like this cheeky fellow. But the male koala senses territory in other ways too. You can distinguish the fully developed adult male koala by its quite visible chest cavity in the middle of its chest. It's actually a scent gland. And it's the scent gland on his chest that the adult male koala uses to mark his territory. Rubbing its chest against branches and twigs, usually at the bottom of a tree, produces an unusual reaction. This interesting activity triggers a particular sensation within the male koala, or buck. This sensation is accompanied by the secreting of a scented fluid that is exceptionally attractive to female koalas. When this is done, not only has the male koala marked his territory as a breeding ground, he's probably already in the mood for love. The bolus spider, also known as the angling spider, uses sex pheromones to ensnare its prey. It's known as aggressive mimicry, where a predator copies something from their prey in order to confuse or entice it. The bolus spider emits a pheromone indistinguishable from the female moth and lures male moths to their doom. It's a key weapon in the bolus spider's arsenal, as this is one spider that doesn't catch its victims in the usual web. Instead, they hunt using a sticky capture blob at the end of a line, which they swing at male moths, drenched, of course, in false scent. Now for the final segments of the program, to look at some genuine super sense sniffers. Let's begin with those lords of the forest, the wolf. A wolf's sense of smell is estimated to be 100 times stronger than humans. They use it to locate other members of the pack, their enemies, and of course, their prey. Scent will tell them if other wolves have been in the area, how many there were, male or female, and how recently. The wolf has several specialized scent glands on its body, including its back and about 3 inches from its tail. The scent it produces from these glands is as distinctive as fingerprints are to a forensic crime lab. Each and every wolf's is different. Wolves mark boundaries and trails using the smell from these highly individual scent glands. You might say their own personal calling cards. These trails and boundaries, or scent stations, can be up to 100 meters apart. Mankind has benefited from observing this behavior. As dogs have a scent ability close to that of wolves, training techniques have evolved which imitate the wolf in the wild. You can see this in search and rescue dogs, as well as police and drug detection. Second of the super scent sniffers, one of the greatest noses on Earth, belongs to the mighty bear. For some reason, it's gotten about that bears have poor eyesight. That's simply not true, but they rely on scent and smell even more. Their acute sense of smell helps them to track down food. For example, bears can detect a dead animal from 35 kilometers away. Smell helps bears to find mates, keep a track on rival bears, and mothers to keep track of their cubs. Bears communicate with one another using scent. By leaving scent on trees and vegetation, they broadcast a message to other bears that may be in the neighborhood. Even though a bear's brain is about the third of the size of a human's, the area of its brain, which manages smell, is at least 5 times larger than ours. But it's not all that cerebral, far from it. The bear's nose is quite a remarkable device. Around 9 inches long for one thing, it really is all the better to smell you with. Their noses contain hundreds of miniature muscles which they can manipulate with the same ease as we might move our fingers. The surface area inside their noses is also vast by human standards and contains hundreds of receptors. And they have that Jacobson's organ in the roof of their mouth to round out this sensory arsenal. But what about the age-old question, can a bear smell your fear? The answer is yes and no. A bear can smell if you break into a cold sweat, but it doesn't register this as fear per se. So it's truer to say they can sense fear rather than smell it. On Animal Super Senses, we touch it and feel it, see it and hear it, taste it and smell it, like animals do. The senses are the star on this show, and this episode has been no exception. Taste and scent are as vital in the wild as they are in the world we've made for ourselves, maybe even more so. But these incredible powers of perception will fight again another day. So join us next time on Animal Super Senses.
Anyone fascinated by the natural world has probably wondered why some animals have such strange-looking sense organs. The elephant with its huge ears. The antennae of a butterfly, which up close look like feathers. The snake with its split tongue. And what about less obvious enhancements, like the sensory cells on a crocodile's skin? Surely these evolutionary traits aren't just for decoration. In fact, the size, shape, and location of these animal sense organs is all for a purpose. And just like us, animals rely on their senses to communicate with each other, find their way around, stay safe, and most importantly, to find food. When you see how superior some animal senses are compared to those of humans, you might wonder how we ever managed to stay on top of the food chain. Animal super senses. You won't believe what's possible.
This is Animal Super Senses, the show that grants you the vision and sound, the scents and smells, tastes and touches of the animal realm. Those are the senses we share with most animals, but what about those senses that no human is equipped with? Some animals seem to have superhuman senses, powers that can detect magnetic fields, electrical fields, and infrared radiation. Yes, there's a whole spectrum of information out there that just passes us ordinary humans by. We need special technology to register and measure them, whereas some animals come with their own biological equipment just for that purpose. Welcome to the arena of superhuman animal super senses. We begin our journey with some animals that are truly magnetic. Tiny quantities of magnetite have been found in many animals with a superior sense of direction. But let's begin with a bit of a flutter, courtesy of the monarch butterfly. Small but perfectly formed, it is found in various habitats around the world, as far apart as New Guinea and Bermuda, New Zealand, and Mexico. Those found in the eastern U.S. and southeast Canada spend the summer months there before flying south for winter to a single mountainous spot in central Mexico. It's a journey that can see them fly up to 5,000 kilometers. The second and third generation monarch butterflies return in the spring. But how do they know their way home, or indeed find their way south in the first place? By using their internal compass, literally. It used to be thought monarch butterflies navigated by the position of the sun. But that didn't explain how they continued in the right direction even on heavily overcast days. Not only that, but to adjust for changes in location when they are literally blown off course. The butterflies must be able to set and reset their internal compass based on their current location. Biologists have found monarch butterflies have magnetic molecules in their brains sensitive to the Earth's magnetic field. So really, just like a compass. They use these in combination with the sun's position to make their epic journeys. way you look at it, long-distance animal migrations are one of the great wonders of the natural world. And nowhere more so than the marine environment, where migratory patterns can reach amazing magnitude. How these creatures find their way there and back, navigating vast distances with such precision, was for a long time a mystery. A riddle of sensory and behavioral biology. Sea turtles, like the loggerhead turtle here, are among the most extraordinary navigators of the fathomless deep. As hatchlings, baby turtles which have never before been in the ocean are able to somehow set an unfailing course towards the open sea and then maintain their heading long after swimming beyond the visible shoreline. Little baby hatchling loggerhead sea turtles first swim from the Florida coast eastward to the North Atlantic. Then, gradually over the course of several years, following complicated migratory paths over huge expanses of seemingly featureless ocean, then return again to the North American shores. Now, the most difficult part of open sea navigation is determining longitude or east or west position. It took human navigators centuries of long-distance voyages to figure out how to do that. But luckily, loggerhead turtles pick up on magnetic signals in order to determine their position, both east-west and north-south. As adults, they retain these phenomenal navigational skills, which guide them as they migrate between specific feeding areas and nesting beaches. Other long-distance migrators thought to possess magnetic superpower sense include both humpback and sperm whales. Sperm whales, of course, are easy to recognize due to their enormous heads with prominent foreheads. They have the largest brain of any creature on Earth. They dive over 3,000 feet in search of food and consume about 3% of their body weight per day. When they dive for their dinner, they can hold their breaths for up to 90 minutes. Female sperm whales and calves remain in tropical or subtropical waters the whole year round and apparently practice communal childcare. Males become sexually mature at 18 years, at which point they migrate to higher latitudes, where the water is colder and the pickings are richer. Traveling alone or in groups, they cruise the oceans at over 30 kilometers per hour. Later, they head back towards the equator to breed. These journeys would seem to require a pretty foolproof internal compass. Humpback whales, meanwhile, are found in all the world's oceans. In the southern hemisphere, humpback whales will migrate from Antarctica to the subtropical coastal waters of western and eastern Australia and Fiji, where they mate and give birth during the winter and spring. Northern humpback whales, on the other hand, find their way from Alaska to Hawaii, swimming in a straight line. We're talking journeys that are thousands of kilometers long. How do they do it? One theory is they have a unique guidance system, utilizing a combination of solar and magnetic navigation. This hypothesis comes in part from mass strandings of whales, thought to be affected by solar activity causing disturbances to the Earth's magnetic field, and the fact that small quantities of magnetite have been found in the brains of humpback whales. Another ocean leviathan, the shark, finds its way around thanks to the power of electroreception. In fact, every type of shark breed has electrical sensors in their nose and heads, named after a 17th century man of science called Stefano Lorenzini. The ampullae of Lorenzini are actually special electroreceptor organs. Though named almost 350 years ago, it was only in the 1960s where Dutch scientists were able to identify the main function of Lorenzini's ampullae, electroreceptivity. In the last 15 years, it's been concluded that sharks can also perceive temperature deviations using the electrosensory system. When a fish swims through the water, it generates an electric field which is detected by the sharks. These sensors wouldn't work anywhere near as well in the open air, but salt water is an excellent conductor of electricity. Even a stingray, hidden beneath the sand, is not safe from the sensors of a hammerhead shark. So, while its name might suggest anything but refinement, the hammerhead shark, as seen here, does have a very refined sense of electroreception. That's thanks to the size and shape of their broad, flat heads, meaning the ampullae are spread over a greater surface area, so sensing out prey is made that much easier. And now to an animal that's an exception to the rule, and just about every other rule. The platypus, known too as the duck-billed platypus, is a semi-aquatic, egg-laying mammal found only in eastern Australia and Tasmania. The first scientists to examine a specimen believed they were victims of some elaborate taxidermy hoax. Well, the platypus is definitely a one-off. It has a duck bill and webbed feet, a beaver tail, and the body shape and fur of an otter. Male platypuses are also venomous, with sharp stingers on the heels of their rear feet that will knock out just about anything with a pulse. These Australian mammals are bottom feeders that will hunt underwater. In spite of their mishmash of physique, they make surprisingly graceful swimmers. They paddle with their front webbed feet and steer with their hind legs and that beaver-like tail. When they submerge, folds of skin cover their eyes and ears and stop water from entering, and their nostrils are sealed shut. The platypus can remain underwater for a minute or two at a time, using its sensitive duck bill to find food. Shellfish, worms, larvae, and insects make up the bulk of the platypus's diet. Along with bits of mud and gravel, all these consumables are stored in pouches in the platypus's cheeks. When they come to the surface, they mash everything up and eat it, using the bits of gravel to help them chew their food. Well, after all, it's not like they have teeth. But if their eyes and nostrils are closed underwater, then how do they manage to sense potential food when it's around? The answer can be found on its duck-like bill. Each and every platypus bill contains around 40,000 electroreceptors arranged in rows. Electrical impulses alert the platypus to objects underwater. Electrical currents travel through water better than air, and the platypus's side-to-side swimming style surely helps conductivity too. Let's head back to dry land, to the forests and woodlands of either Papua New Guinea or Australia. That's where you'll find this spiky fellow, the echidna, a short-beaked echidna in this case. Sometimes known as spiny anteaters, the echidna is, like the platypus, an egg-laying mammal. If you live in Australia, you have seen its likeness on the 5-cent coin. But unlike the platypus, the spiny anteater spends all its time on dry land, giving it the distinction of being the world's only terrestrial egg-laying mammal. The echidna is also the only land-born mammal we know to possess the supersense of electroreception. Put simply, hundreds of receptors concentrated in the tip of the snout allow it to pick up on natural electrical stimuli. This is particularly useful when it comes to hunting for buried prey. The short-beaked echidna, as seen here, uses those electroreceptors to pick up on the movements of ants and termites. Concealed as they may be to the naked eye, but the humidity in their nests, particularly after the rain, is a dead giveaway. And now, from curious egg-laying animals to a creature that most of us would probably pass by without a second thought, given the opportunity. We speak now of the dung beetle. Not the most glamorous of creations, this humble insect is actually remarkable in several ways. Okay, let's deal with their diet first. Just as their name suggests, dung beetles are beetles that feed exclusively, or for the main part anyway, on dung and feces. Industriously laboring away on the lower end of the food chain, they possess exceptional talent as dung disposal units. Why a single dung beetle can bury dung that is 250 times its own body weight in the course of one night. Because this critter does a lot more than just live up to its name. It calls to mind something the writer and wit Oscar Wilde once said, "We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars." Well, as it turns out, the dung beetle is looking at the stars. Dung beetles have compound eyes that are built for low light. While most insects would only be able to see a few of the brightest stars in the sky, the Milky Way's distinctive streak of light is a useful navigation cue. It has been deduced already that dung beetles use polarized moonlight to walk backwards in a straight line. But figuring out how they orient themselves on moonless nights has just been discovered. Scientists tested the idea that dung beetles exploit the starry sky for orientation. They created special little hats made from black cardboard, which were taped to the heads of dung beetles. The hats blocked the beetles' view of the night sky and confirmed the scientists' hunch that these insects navigate by using the Milky Way's map of the stars. The theory was confirmed in a planetarium, where a projection of the Milky Way was turned on and off. The dung beetle is now in the sensory spotlight. The humble poo gatherer presents the first documented use of the Milky Way for orientation in the animal kingdom. A sunset is a thing of beauty, but it's more than that for songbirds. Recent research in two songbird species, Swainson's thrushes and gray-cheeked thrushes, has demonstrated that. Scientists are positive these birds can detect Earth's magnetic field even if they're not quite sure how. While it's well documented that animals such as sea turtles rely on internal stores of mineral magnetite, which act like tiny magnetic needles in the animal's cells, how birds do it is still a mystery. Receptors in their eyes, or do they do it with their sense of smell? The jury, so to speak, is still out. Whatever the case, even though these birds are well equipped to detect Earth's magnetic field, they also need to calibrate their internal compass from time to time, on a daily basis, in fact. Relying solely on Earth's magnetic field could have the effect of blowing the songbirds off course as the field shifts direction in their North American breeding grounds. Enter the sun, which always sets in the west. It's nice to know that even for animals with superhuman senses, sometimes the eternal verities stay true. On Animal Super Senses, the stars are the senses. And in this episode, they've taken us from the ocean's depths to the skies above, from life teeming beneath our feet to one of the largest creatures on Earth. We have been on a journey of senses, superhuman animal senses. But the trip is far from over. These incredible powers of perception will live to fight again another day. So join us next time on Animal Super Senses.
Anyone fascinated by the natural world has probably wondered why some animals have such strange-looking sense organs. The elephant with its huge ears. The antennae of a butterfly, which up close look like feathers. The snake with its split tongue. And what about less obvious enhancements, like the sensory cells on a crocodile's skin? Surely these evolutionary traits aren't just for decoration. In fact, the size, shape, and location of these animal sense organs is all for a purpose. And just like us, animals rely on their senses to communicate with each other, find their way around, stay safe, and most importantly, to find food. When you see how superior some animal senses are compared to those of humans, you might wonder how we ever managed to stay on top of the food chain. Animal super senses. You won't believe what's possible.
Welcome to the show that puts you in the eyes and ears, the taste buds and nerve endings of wild animals. There's a whole world and more than one spectrum of sensations that animals are aware of which just pass humans by. And yet, while it's widely known that, for example, a dog's sense of smell is dozens of times more acute than humans, or that goats have close to a 360-degree field of vision, there is a kind of sixth sense that some animals have which still defies explanation. Call it extrasensory perception, animal abilities we can't entirely explain, but which leave us wondering and in awe. For example, take the animal response to disaster, such as the tsunami. Tragically, the tidal wave killed over 200,000 people, but the animal population was comparatively unscathed. Observers even recollect animals leaving hours before the disaster. How did they know? Can animals' extrasensory powers predict natural disasters? Do animals have a kind of extrasensory perception or sixth sense that alerts them to danger? Well, the answer is we still really don't know, but it's fascinating to speculate. And that's mostly what we'll be doing in this episode of Animal Super Senses, asking questions. The tsunami of 2004. In the hours before the tsunami hit, there are reports that at elephant camps, the large mammals were becoming agitated. They trumpeted loudly, what may have been elephantine distress calls. Many even managed to break free from their camps, presumably to head for higher ground. Just hours later, disaster. In retrospect, it seems entirely possible the elephants were responding to low-frequency rumbles that are produced when storms approach and atmospheric weather changes occur. These rumbles happen in a spectrum of sound called infrasound that is below our level of hearing, but it is one which elephants use all the time to communicate over long distances, to listen in for approaching storms, and so on. Infrasound can travel vast distances through ground, air, and water. It can be generated by wind and thunder, volcanoes, earthquakes, and huge movements of water. Scientists think that elephants feel these vibrations through their trunks or even their feet. So the next time you see an elephant with its trunk to the ground, just think it may not be sniffing the terrain, but making a trunk call. What that means, not just listening out for sound, but picking up vibrations through its trunk, which has been found contains a pressure-sensitive nerve capable of detecting seismic signals. Meanwhile, you might think, wouldn't it be great if humans had the ability to use infrasound to detect natural phenomena like hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanic activity, and tsunamis? Infrasound, low-frequency sounds, are produced by a variety of geophysical processes, but also some of the more dramatic man-made sources, aircraft and explosions, for example. In the United States, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, are currently developing highly sophisticated instruments to detect and monitor these kinds of extreme events. Naturally, those kinds of instruments all cost a small fortune to do what elephants do naturally, without even making that big of a deal about it. The production and perception of infrasound has been observed in multiple mammals, including whale, giraffe, hippo, and rhino. We can assume that some animals are influenced by environmental changes that can occur before a natural calamity. However, our understanding of such possible precursor effects and how organisms react to them is still very limited. As long as this limitation exists, the unusual behavior of animals alone cannot be used to evaluate an increased risk of earthquake or the arrival of a tsunami. But there seem to be other cues which animals tune into, far beyond the reach of the normal sensory package. If it's something in the air, then we're probably going to be way down on the species list before we sense it. When it comes to noticing shifts in barometric pressure, the sort of changes caused by a hurricane at sea, for instance, it seems birds leave us for dust. Seagulls in particular seem to know when to seek shelter from the storm. They instinctively head inland, away from the coastline, prior to the onset of inclement weather. It is believed they sense changes in the air pressure and know just when it's time to hightail it out of there. Some birds just seem to have an internal barometer about these things, literally. Migratory birds, for example, like these white-throated sparrows. These fine feathered fellas breed in Canada and New England, but when the winter comes to call, they migrate to warmer spots in the southern and eastern United States. Their inbuilt barometer, for thus it seems to be, allows them to detect changes in air pressure. Some birds' abilities to detect an approaching storm can determine exactly when a large flock leaves for a long flight. Not only can they select the best departure time, but also the best altitude for long-distance travel. It's yet another instance where mankind has to invent and design all kinds of sensitive and expensive equipment just to match what comes naturally in the wild. Some avian species act more like weather forecasters than others do. When humans lived closer to nature, several observations were made about birds and the weather. Not all of them strictly scientific, but seeming to contain more than a seed of truth. Birds flying high in the sky are meant to be a sign of fine weather approaching. If they fly low, however, or don't fly at all, then it's believed a storm is on its way. But then on the one hand, some say birds become noisier as bad weather approaches, while on the other, there are those who will swear birds become abnormally quiet before a storm. Large groups of birds perching on power lines is said to be an indication of stormy weather. Another widely held belief is that if birds feed during the rain, it means the rain will last a long time. If they don't come out to feed, then the rain will end soon. The sixth sense for barometric pressure certainly hasn't been distributed evenly through the species. We travel now, with a certain amount of trepidation, to the shallow waters, coral reefs, and coastlines. That is the natural habitat of this sleek and deadly character. It is the blacktip shark, and it too has a similar uncanny ability to feel things, but it is not so much in the air as in the water. We all know that tropical storms develop as low-pressure systems offshore. How do sharks respond to the pressure of an approaching tropical storm? There are some interesting facts that might surprise you. In 2001, Tropical Storm Gabrielle made landfall in central Florida. Researchers had been tracking the movements of a population of juvenile blacktip sharks in a small bay there for about 3 years. Blacktip sharks were typically resident in this bay for 6 to 8 months during the summer before swimming south for the winter. The research corroborated that the blacktips typically did not leave the area until migration time, and definitely not in large groups. As Tropical Storm Gabrielle approached the coast, the researchers simply didn't have enough time to remove their array of acoustic receivers, their listening stations, from the water. They simply left them behind and hoped for the best. Fortunately, the equipment was still intact after the storm, and when researchers downloaded the data a little while later, they discovered something amazing. Not only had all the blacktip sharks they had been tracking left, but as it turned out, they had all split the scene some 7 hours before Hurricane Gabrielle hit the coast. The almost inescapable conclusion was that the sharks responded to the decrease in barometric air pressure that precedes such a big storm and made for the open seas. When it comes to storm warnings, some of the evidence for animal foresight is anecdotal at best, and sometimes even a bit murky. The most commonly repeated of these tales is that of amphibians, namely frogs and toads, who are reputed to croak louder before rainfall. Another fascinating case study is the tree frog, where it is most commonly kept as a household pet. Tree frog pets are most commonly kept in a big glass jar with a ladder running up to the lid. What the anecdotal evidence seems to suggest is that if the tree frog stays at the bottom of the jar, then rain is imminent. If, on the other hand, the little green chap climbs up the ladder, then the higher he goes, the better the weather will be. Meanwhile, back in the wild, green tree frogs are sometimes known as rain frogs. They are so named because their call is said to be the loudest at the onset of stormy weather. To find the most accurate weather forecasters on the planet, it's possible we need to get down on our knees with a magnifying glass and look into the dirt. Again, this observable phenomena still doesn't exactly come under the heading of scientific fact. But could it be that ants are the most reliable weather forecasters on Earth? Any definitive conclusions will have to wait until all the research is in. But keen observers have noted that when ants build steep mound sides to their nests, it seems to be an indication that rains are on their way. With the approach of inclement weather, ants have been witnessed carrying out extra industrious labor, working furiously, more furiously than usual, to either build and move into new nests or fix up and clean their existing nests. Maybe it's only spring cleaning, but they also gather food, as if preparing for a siege, the good little soldiers that they are. But how do they know without being able to utilize some type of extrasensory perception or insects' sixth sense? Even the most accurate scientific research still doesn't have a good answer for that. To observe another animal that has faculties which could indicate a sixth sense, you don't need a magnifying glass, or indeed to travel to some exotic corner of the world. In fact, you might not need to go any further than your own backyard. Long known as humans' best friend, different breeds of dogs have demonstrated their loyalty and courage throughout the centuries. They can also be trained as canine detectives, able to sniff out everything from narcotics to termites, concealed explosive devices, to people trapped under rubble. Smell is a dog's dominant sense. So much so that a huge part of its brain is devoted to analyzing odors. Dogs have two giant olfactory bulbs attached to the brain, which decode every smell they encounter. The bulbs weigh about 4 times as much as human olfactory bulbs. But the source of the dog's exceptional ability to smell is its wet snout. The moist, leathery surface of the snout acts like Velcro, catching even the tiniest molecules of smells, then dissolving them so that the dog's internal smell receptor cells can analyze them properly. To keep his nose wet, a dog must produce a constant supply of mucus through its nasal cavities. What is possibly less well known is their seeming extrasensory perception as medical detection dogs. Medical detection dogs are becoming increasingly popular among diabetics. Dogs seem to have an uncanny ability to alert their diabetic owners when their blood sugar levels are too low. Although odor clues seem to be the most plausible explanation, no one is entirely sure how these adorable friends can do this. The senses are the stars in super senses, and this episode has been no exception. We have been on a fantastic voyage, led by the extrasensory perceptions some animals have, a few of which really do defy explanation. The sixth senses have taken us from the ocean depths to the jungle, the teeming life underfoot, to the migratory patterns of birds on the wing, and the incredible sense of smell of our inseparable canine friends. And these super senses will be back to fight again another day. So join us next time on Animal Super Senses.